Thanks for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This is a scene that I just finished today, featuring the autumn banks left and right. On this scene, I wanted to introduce kind of a diversity of hue within the trees. A lot of times in the past, I've had some greens and oranges and reds running through this tree line before, but I wanted to do it where, I don't know, the trees were in various stages of color, or maybe there's two different types of trees kind of interspersed throughout the shoreline here. So some more yellow-green and some more of the orangish tone. And to achieve that, I've used mostly the alcohol-based types of markers. These ones happen to be the lip plumes. You can use your Copics and whatever types of markers you happen to have. But the key here for me was, well, two different things. Making it so that the trees aren't so different from one another that it looks like just kind of a patchwork of kind of non-related trees in there. I didn't want them to kind of stand out from one another so much. So the idea of running a lot of yellow through both of the different colors of trees in there was important, and the foundation with that would be yellow. A lot of that is in the bushes, and the second part of this scene was I wanted to make it look like a real mirrored surface, so I had to really bring in some of these brighter colors into the water before, as far as the reflection of what's going on above the reflection. So sometimes I've been a little skittish as far as doing that before. Sometimes I haven't wanted so much of that bright tone down here, because it might look kind of weird. But I think it worked okay. Sometimes kind of having this intermediate zone in here with really bright tones above and below without anything in the middle kind of looks strange. So I've solved that. For me, I think it worked out okay as just running some pigment ink in here. So the pigment ink effects in here are kind of well, I would say they're important wherever I use it, typically, but in this scene especially, just in some of the transitions here, going from sky to kind of mid-ground, I've kind of dabbed in some pigment ink over these background trees, and then we have the trees themselves, and then where the trees transition into the water and foreground, I've added some pigment ink in here. So there's a little bit of pigment ink at the base of this canoe. If you want to see the kind of the pigment ink fog-like type of applications, you can always fast forward to the end of this, really all of these videos where I've used it, and I use it in a lot of videos. So just these little transitions in here really help to just smooth out those meeting places of all of these different layers of kind of visual depth. And gel pens work really good as far as having some kind of unifying little texture in here. We have little highlights in the trees, in the rocks, and little bits in the foreground trees as well. And you can see that towards the end of the video as well. But you can, I don't know if you can kind of see that little dots here and there throughout that foreground. Just kind of make the scene look a little bit more three-dimensional too. So anyways, this is a really fun scene. The times that I have the most fun in scenes is kind of putting in the finishing touches and kind of bringing everything together. Throughout a lot of this video, when I'm adding a lot of color down here, the color in that tree line right there, it's just so much more intense than some of the colors that are running around in the rest of the scene, so I don't know, it's hard to kind of anchor that intensity in there and making it look as though it's a part of the scene. Otherwise, it kind of stands out too much. So, bring in little bits of color here and there, and I don't know, just running some pigment, alcohol based marker kind of swipes in the water here and there just seem to bring it all around. And of course, the pigment ink was the biggest thing. So, I'm telling you, the pigment ink, kind of foggy effects in here really. I would say I used to refer to it as kind of saving my scene, but it's such an integral part of the look now. I would say that when I'm doing this, I just figure if something's not turning out quite the way I want it, I know that I can just kind of fog it out a little bit, just with a little bit of pigment ink in a kind of a dry brushed application. So anyway, the Autumn Bank left and right. I hadn't stamped it out for a while, and I was looking at some orders the other day, and I don't know, when you get a stamp in your hand, and I don't know, for me, when I get those stamps in my hand quite often, and if I haven't used it for a little bit of time, I really feel like stamping something out, and I don't know, the ideas start running through my head as far as kind of using it in a little bit of a different look than what I've done before. Other people have done it too, but I just haven't done it in quite some time as far as the different looks in here. So, fun thing to do. And as I look at this final piece, I'm really pleased with the kind of the mirrored look, especially down here in the water and sky. So, bring your colors from the trees right down into the water as far as your reflections go, and it'll really look like a nice mirrored surface. Okay? So anyways, if you choose to watch this video, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, we're going to do something here with some of the autumn imagery. The first thing I'm going to do is to just talk about some of the interlocking aspects of it, how these three main images blend together. I'm taking the Autumn Bank left here, and I'll stamp it out somewhere. This is a quarter-page cardstock. And I can place this wherever I want it to go. I'm stamping it on a quarter page just to show you the aspect of size and how, with the larger stamps, you can use as much of them as you want, but you don't always have to use them in their entirety, so large stamps can be used for a smaller scene. Okay, now this stamp right here, Autumn Bank, can link up with the Autumn Brook stamp, or it can link up with the Autumn Bank right here. You would just have to match up the kind of the shorelines here. Let's take a look at it with the Autumn Bank right. Okay, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm taking a peek underneath this. This is on the wood block. If it were on an acrylic block unmounted, it would be a little bit easier to see, but all I have to do is I'm just taking a peek under here and just making sure that this part right here overlaps about a 1/4 inch, maybe 1/8 inch or so. Just match up the tree lines, but what we don't want is a gap in between, unless that's some kind of compositional arrangement you want. Okay. Alright, no masking needed, of course. Now let's do that Autumn Bank left again. And let's take a look at this composition with the Autumn Brook instead. Okay, I'll stamp this a little bit more off the page just to utilize more of the Autumn Brook on this one, just for some change. Okay, and let's go to the Autumn Brook here. Okay, and roughly 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch or so is where that shoreline will overlap into this shoreline, okay? Large stamps use plenty of interior pressure, be it on a wood block or an acrylic block. Stamps that have a lot of surface area require an adequate amount of pressure to get a good impression, okay? So now, let's say, for example, I had a larger scene, okay? I stamp this one like this, okay? Where it blends in with this one. But let's say I have a space over here, I can always overlap these two. Overlap it on this side, the right side of the stamp on the left side of the brook. Or I can use the left side of this on the right side of the brook like that. And you can see how those merge together. But they're all meant to blend together in a seamless fashion, just like all the rest of the stamps. But let's just say, for example, I had, you know, this composition on kind of a larger, oops, I just smeared that right there, but you can see how this kind of blends together like this. Not exactly, but, you know, because I cut that tree off, but, you know, for the most part, visually, you know, these things can come together like so. Or that one can go right here, okay? So really not too bad. So you can do a, you know, if you wanted to do a big panoramic, you know, in theory could, you know, you can have as long a piece of paper as you want. And just repeat the images over and over, overlapping with their sibling designs, okay? So, let's take a look here. I was wanting to do some fall foliage and maybe not bring in so much color with, like, say, something like the color box stylus tool, but maybe using more pen work to go with this in the form of alcohol-based pens. But those are really good for certain things, and you know, especially specifics within the you know, given composition with a lot of small shapes in here. I can go in and I can add greens or yellows in some of these trees. Maybe another tree is kind of more of the, you know, the golden, yellow, red, orange type of foliage. So we'll get to that in a moment, but let's add in some things on the sky, okay? Now, if this water is really still and reflective, then what we'll have is some of the colors of the sky reflecting down here in the water. So I'm going to do that with color as well as imagery. This is one of the new kind of negative space cloud stamps. Let's see here. This is the unmounted stamp used on the tack and peel cling, okay? Looks like I'm going to need to wash this off pretty soon, but I've applied tack and peel on this. It's this little tacky, temporary mounting material that you apply to acrylic block permanently, but as far as the images go, they're just a temporary mount. Okay, colors, all right. I'm just going to do this one in, the sky is going to be in your blue tones, okay? I'm going to use a light blue. If you have a Marvy light blue, it would be something like the Salvia blue. The Memento would be a summer sky. Just about everyone, as far as manufacturers go, have some form of light blue. If it's a dye-based ink, you can use that. Okay, now I'm going to stamp this all throughout the sky. very, very, very light tone. Whether you can see it or not, I'm not sure. I'm hoping this camera can pick it up. And I'll do the same down here. I'm kind of flipping the card around and using that sky texture down below. Now, because this ink, Summer Sky, is so pale in value, I'll use. This is a new pad as well, so it's not just dry or something like that. But what I'll do is I'll go in it. I'll add some additional darker tone using the same impression or design. Give me a darker impression. Okay. Okay. This is the Bahama Blue. It's almost the exact same color as the Marvy Blue number 10, which is called Light Blue. Okay, kind of making it a little bit darker up here in the sky and lighter in the horizon, and I'll do the same thing down in the water as far as the reflections go. Okay. Okay, so we get this transition, kind of maybe a lighter horizon, and transitioning into the darker sky. Although I wouldn't call it a dark sky, I would just say darker. Okay, now when you do that, the imagery itself kind of acts as a toning device in terms of bringing or introducing value into a certain area. We have this transition of tones without adding any ink at all to, you know, in terms of post-imagery color application, specifically sponging, you know, some color on, which I'll do here. Alright, let's see. Let's start off with that summer sky again. Okay, this summer sky is very pale, so it's a good color to start off with. Memento inks happen to be very thick, so they really blend and apply to the cardstock in a very seamless fashion. Okay, what I'm finding right now is that the impression right here, I just re-inked my black Marvy, so the ink's a little bit wet here, so I'm not gonna pause here, although for you guys, if I paused it and waited for it to dry, it wouldn't take any time at all, because I'll cut all that out, but I'm not gonna bother. I'm just gonna go in and do it. Okay, if some of it smears and some of it smears, it'll look a little bit more kind of a blue grayish tone. Okay, I'm going to retain that lightness of the horizon, okay? And I'm kind of dabbing as opposed to streaking it when it's around, when I'm going over that autumn bank impression. I didn't right there, it smeared a little bit, but sometimes the ink dries very quickly. It happens to be very, very wet outside, you know, in terms of the humidity goes, so maybe this ink isn't drying quite as fast as it does sometime, but again, like I said, I'm not worried about that. Okay, let me bring in a little bit of this color into the water. One of the things I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to bring in some of these colors that I introduced to the trees down in their reflections in the water. That's something that I don't do enough of. And I was looking at some photos recently. I thought, yeah, I need to make things a little bit more mirror-like in the water sometimes. I bring the colors of the sky down into it, but, you know, if there's a green tree or a, you know, bright red tree right here, it stands to reason that it would be bright red in the reflection down here. Okay, that's enough of the summer sky, I think. It provides a nice foundation for other colors to come. I'm going to go with the Bahama Blue, the same color that I stamped the darker clouds in. I'll make it a little bit more streaky. I'll kind of go on the side of this, or the edge of the stylus tool in some areas. See, I'm turning the card in a direction that's the most conducive to that type of streak going across the water. All right. You know, there's like little striations in the water, so you want to kind of turn the card in the angle in which you can kind of achieve that look. This would not be so easy for me, you know, using that type of hand motion or angle to the motion too. Okay, so we're bringing in some atmosphere now with this kind of medium blue value. Okay, now I feel I do need some, I probably should have done this before I went in with the memento, but let's add a little bit of that blue of the summer sky, okay, to some of this area in the design, the autumn banks, okay. Now I figure I'm going to make some of this grass in here green, so blue, of course, relates to green. It's a component of it. So I don't want all of the imagery to look so kind of different from the sky. So I'm going to introduce some of that same color into the image, okay? Now it might not read as blue, but it'll have that blue in common in terms of a little bit of a familiarity to bring continuity to the scene. Okay, so I have it down here, especially in the grassy areas below the tree. Okay, you see it down here. Some of these areas I've left, you know, the tree just as is, but maybe I'll bring in some blues here and there for the trees that will eventually be more of a kind of a greenish, yellow-green tinged trees. I won't bring too much of it into the trees that might be red or something like that. Okay, bring some of this blue into the shadows a little bit. Okay. All right. I'm trying to decide now if I want to use this stylus tool for some of these trees that might be a little bit green in tone. Maybe. I tell you what, though, before I do that, so this tip right here, I used the Bahama Blue. Let's use a little bit of a darker blue. Let me see, I actually have a memento. Memento. Danube Blue. Okay, let's go in the four corners with this one. just to kind of frame off the composition a little bit more. Especially for the fact that the imagery was stamped in black, so we'll really need to introduce some more of that level of value into other areas of the scene. You know, again, to bring kind of a continuity to it. Otherwise, if you don't have kind of that same value in other areas, maybe in this vignette type of thing, that's what I use practically all the time. It can create a kind of a feel that the imagery is kind of floating, you know, it's not really anchored into the scene. So that's why you kind of throw these kind of darker tones, at least in the edges of the card somewhere. It doesn't have to always be that way, but just some sort of a kind of a binding element tends to look very good in the end result. It could be all kinds of things. It could be value, color, or texture. Maybe it could be imagery. Let's say you have some kind of foreground, you know, tree or grass or something like that growing in from the sides. You know, that could work too. Alright, that was the darker blue. Alright, now let's have some fun in here and let's really put some additional tone into the scene in the form of some brighter colors. Why don't we try some of the... Now, before I go to the bright, I'm kind of chicken here. Let's start off with something kind of dull and light at first, get a feel for it, then we'll go in with something like this yellow-green tone. So kind of a dull greens to bright greens are what we're talking about here. And I'll go in and add a little bit of that into the grassy areas. And, I mean, maybe some of those, you know, those grasses, bushes down there also change color, maybe, so maybe I don't do it, you know, this color on everything. Okay, now at this point in time I have to kind of decide which one of these trees are going to be more green than, you know, yellow, orange, red types of colors. So I'll just take a look and I'll see what some of the trees I added blue to, you know, as far as their location. And maybe I'll use those ones for green. Okay. Okay, now this is where I need to kind of follow suit with some of that color down and the reflections as well, right? If this is going to be a mirror and we really want to kind of bring that element to the scene, then you need to bring the colors that are, you know, above the water to reflect just that. I'm kind of rambling here. I haven't done this too much. It'll be interesting to see some of those oranges down there. Okay, Let's see. Green, 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 green. There's a little green down there. Okay, let's go into this tree. Okay. All right. That was the pale green, very light green. Let's say if you don't have a light green, but you have, say, a darker green, this one's a pine green, or, you know, kind of your Christmas green, neutral, dark green, or something like that. If you don't have this, something like that color, you can always just go with a darker green, something like that. Put some water into your applicator of choice, you know, don't soak it or anything like that, but get some in there and then dab, you know, some ink out of that, and it should be a much more pale version of whatever color you're going with. If you don't have a color like this, yellow-green, this is kind of yellow-green too, what you can use is kind of a neutral yellow, and bring that neutral yellow in over the kind of your lighter green tone, and you should get something akin to this just by using something like that. Okay? Okay, let's see what this is going to look like. Pretty bright. As I start bringing this into the scene, it's probably going to look kind of strange because you're starting to move into a different temperature here. See that right there? So, what I was getting at is sometimes this looks kind of strange because it's the only temperature change right now in those given areas. It's kind of bright as well. But when we hopefully bring all these colors together, it will blend with its surroundings just fine. It'll integrate and not look so strange. I mean, if I have one tree like that colored in there and the trees aren't around it colored, it looks really weird. So don't worry about that is what I'm getting at here. We have other colors to come, okay? Okay, let's bring some of these bright tones down into the water for their reflections. Maybe I won't have it quite as intense or dark as the trees themselves or imagery itself. Okay, maybe I'll have it a little bit more dull down here than up here. Okay. All right. The leaves are beginning to transition. I'm wondering to myself if I should kind of move into the pens now, or if there's another color that I can possibly do with the stylus tools and sponge tips. But I think I'm going to move into my pens now. I've kind of got the general down. I have some kind of little specifics kind of working in there right now, but not too much. I'm going with some of the Marvy La Plume permanent markers. They're just alcohol-based markers. A lot of you have them in your tool supplies, and I'm just grabbing a bunch of colors right now that I think might look good in somewhat of a fall situation, fall color scheme. Okay. Something like that, maybe. All right. Maybe add in what color is this? Brownish gray, okay. Brownish gray. Here is a biscuit, okay, this one right here. Okay, something like this. I don't know, maybe if I feel confident enough, I'll use something like this red here. It's a tomato red. All right, so if you're not sure it's going to work, just make it visual and start off with your lightest tones. I have no idea how it's going to work, so I don't need to worry about it. If I just go light to begin with, it's not a big commitment to that existing color or tone, or how that tone looks over the colors that I've already laid down. Okay, that actually, I said I was going to go light. That was camel. Yeah, this one right here is better. It's apricot, okay? Now some of these are going to transition into, like I said, more of the your golden tones. So going with something pale is a good beginning to that type of color scheme. Bringing it over a lot of things, again, it's just to kind of bring continuity to it. Continuity to it, meaning the different imagery, okay? And again, it's very light. It's like this color right here. Okay, let's bring some of that down into my reflective water. Okay, now let's try the, let's go back to that camel. It's just that, it looks like a, you know, camel coloring. Alright, after I did that, I'm going to go back to the lighter one and kind of use this lighter one like a little blending tool before that camel sets up too much. You can kind of go back in and dissolve some of that ink to it when it comes to alcohol-based pens. That's before it kind of sets up too much, but okay, this is a apple green. It's a very light green, yellowish green. If you don't have kind of yellow green, you can put that, you know, bring yellow into it over the top of your green, and it'll look yellow-green. I don't know, I should really go more browns down in that grass. That grass looks like a bright spring grass, but I'm bringing fall into it. So I think Some different brown tones will look good, just to kind of, I don't know, mellow that grassy area out a little bit. This is Biscuit. It's kind of a very, very pale orange. Alright, boy, that is really bright in terms of an orange right there, so I'm going to have to be careful with this one. When I say I'm going to have to be careful with it, I just mean I'm going to use it somewhat sparingly, to begin with at least. It really stands out. So let's go back to one of those pale colors, not quite as intense. And let's go and kind of spread that orange color around a bit. Okay, let's bring some of that orange down into the grass. The orange and green, maybe it'll form some sort of brownish tone, hue. Alright, let's go and now let's add in a little pink. Pink is, I mean, it looks pink in some areas that I'm kind of going over white with, but there's not too much white left in here. So where the pink overlaps, the, certain yellows, it looks a little bit more orange. Let's see if I have a really very, very pale pinkish purple or something like that. And I can bring it here into the water, into some of this grassy area. Alright. So I'm always scribbling over here. I want to have kind of a better idea of what color I'm dealing with here, before I take it into the scene. This is the carrot, or red carrot then, huh? Okay, boy, do we really have to kind of spread that one around. Reflections. Okay, now these orange, reddish looking trees are looking okay, I guess. But they're a lot brighter than some of the green trees, so I feel that I need to bring some of these green trees up a little bit in terms of the intensity. Just to kind of, I don't know, somewhat match the intensity of their surroundings. Otherwise, if I don't do this with this green right here, this is a fairly bright green, you know, there's going to be too much change within here. There's going to be a hue change from kind of a green to a red, but there's also going to be an intensity change. If there's something too dull and everything that's red is bright, you know, so I want to bring up the overall brightness of the whole scene, or the whole kind of a tree line, I guess, to kind of match things. But I'll probably bring in, you know, some of the brightness of overall as well, maybe to the sky. Okay. All right, now. I'm still not real happy with the overall in there, so let's try that brownish gray again. I think what this needs is it needs more of a treatment in the water area. Okay, so let's see. This is coffee. I want to bring in some shadows into the scene. Coffee's way too dark. Let's go with the brownish gray. Okay. And we'll put some shadows underneath these trees. And in doing so, if the shadows are underneath the trees, it's also kind of mellowing out some of that bright green grass. It's still nice and rich in terms of the value scale and intensity, but it's just going to kind of anchor the trees down and mellow out some of the colors a little bit, hopefully. Yeah, I think so. This is this color right here, right here. But see, just placing that same color underneath some of these trees, it's making the trees stand out a little bit more and making them look a little bit more dimensional. There's a little bit more, you know, I don't know what the term is, kind of a push-pull maybe. You know, between kind of light and shadow in that given area. Otherwise things were looking a little bit too flat dimensionally in here. Okay, this is a jungle green. It's kind of an olive green. Let's add some of that to the shadows as well. Okay, I think we're dealing with a space that looks a little bit deeper now in those trees. Okay, and I think we're ready to go back in here and let's add a little bit more tone now. Okay, let me go back to that Memento dark blue and just add a little bit more of that, and to kind of moisten the paper just a touch where I'm going to add black, just kind of re-establishing the kind of a damp surface with this ink before I go to my Marvy black again, which is a little bit of a thinner ink, so I don't want it to soak into the paper so much. are so fast. I want it to dry nice and kind of medium slow. All right. Enough of the memento. Let's go to the Marvy Black. Just add in a little bit of a corner. And pull that ink in. Kind of adding some of this into that autumn bank. Adding it into some of the shadows, just again for a little bit of continuity and depth. Also works as a framing device, a vignette. Corner of the sky. Kind of coming around, isn't it? Well, it's anchored into the scene a little bit more. Okay. A lot of colors going on in this scene. Looks like an abstract. Okay, that piece of paper, not this. Alright, well, let's see. Shall we add in some foreground? Yeah, let's do that. This is the reeds large. I know another image that might look in this. It'll kind of reiterate something that's going on in the background with those bare trees. We'll add some of these first. It puts us on a shoreline in terms of, you know, being a viewer of the scene. Frames it off down here. Some additional texture, I guess. All right, let's take a look here. Let's bring in some additional tones, especially in the trees. The trees are kind of desperate for some additional, I don't know, pop, texture, richness. I mean, it's okay as it is, but there's only so much you can do with those pens and sponging techniques or whatever you happen to be using. But going in, this is the Sharpie paint pen, and I want to go in and bring some highlights and texture into that. Maybe it's where you see, I mean, I wouldn't say an individual leaf, but kind of some of the texture that leaves might provide. You know, some of them are shimmering in the sunlight. And some of this green grass below. I can put a few highlights. It doesn't stand out too much because this green is kind of a, I wouldn't call it a medium tone green, but not terribly light either. It's kind of a pastel green, okay? But it is bringing a little bit of texture to some of those green areas on the sand. I'm being very careful not to pick this up because I can see this is really wet right here in terms of, you know, those reeds down at the base. But let's see if I can get this to focus in. There we go. You see what's going on down here with these little dots? You can see it's kind of boring in the background, but put those little dots down there. Let me add a few back in here. Okay, so it's just something like that. Kind of brings those little shadowed areas alive. Okay. This kind of bothers me up here. It's a little bit too light, so that's where the pens can come in too. It can kind of knock back some of that, as well as the something like a pigment ink applied over the top of it will kind of knock back the intensity of that area. Let's try the peach. I once hiked around in Acadia National Park in Maine in full color, right at the peak of their color. One of the rangers mentioned that to me. He was doing they had these trails felt basically to myself, because I rarely saw anyone on them when I was hiking around, but they were doing a lot of trail maintenance at the time, adding in kind of rails and, you know, doing some like little minor bridge repairs in certain areas of the trails. And got talking with one of the rangers, and he said, yeah, that, he goes, all that wasn't there. He was referring to all the different colors. He goes, all that wasn't there last week. So, quite a treat. Oh, gotta pause the vid. I just looked at my camera and the battery's almost dead. Let's see. That. Okay, back a minute later. It's always a good idea to have multiple batteries on hand, I've found, so I always have one kind of charging up as I'm doing these videos. Alright, and I also got this tree, one of these leafless pine trees, and I'm going to put that on a temporary mounting tack and peel material, and we'll add this in here. I'm going to add a few more highlights first, though. Okay, let's do that with the Signo white gel pen. Looks like this. Like, I don't know, Japanese writing here. There's a little bit of a gel built up on my tip, so I'm kind of rolling it off. Now, since I've retained some of the white, you know, the paper in a couple areas, I can add this in here. If there's kind of a white element or area in the scene that you've retained, it means that there could be some of that same color light reflecting off things. So we can use this white gel pen for highlights or I don't know, different details here and there still. If you don't retain some of the whiteness of the page somewhere, kind of these white dots can look kind of out of place visually. So I always like to leave a little bit of that white to give me that option at least at the end. Okay, let's see if we can kind of see some of these areas. There's a little bit of the dots around here. I've kind of interspersed some of the white, you know, in the orange areas. I haven't used any white over here. Let me see if I can kind of maybe add a couple little details in here. I don't need to go crazy with it, but okay, kind of brings that area to life a little bit. We have, you know, kind of darker highlights as well as lighter highlights. So you kind of mix things up like that. Okay. Now, why don't we, I think I'm going to use the Kayaker in there or something. Let's add a bare tree or two or three. Just something kind of taller in the foreground you know, in addition to those reeds, maybe maybe the water level got up higher sometime and it killed the tree. Who knows? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a tree that's already gone kind of dormant. It's already lost its leaves. Who knows? Kind of changes the feel a little bit, doesn't it? I'm adding a kind of a lower one right here. I didn't like how those two kind of look too symmetrical right here and here. So a little bit of a different feel with that those branches in there. I'm going to add a little bit of mist in here to bring in some shimmer to the scene. Maybe add a subject matter in there as well. I mean, we don't have to put something in there, but I don't know, to me it kind of... compositionally, I think it can really use some sort of focal point within that area. Okay, so let's see what we have. I think I'm going to use the one of the kayaks. Looking for my little acrylic block. I must not have used this before because that tack and peel is super, super tacky on this one. Okay, let's see what this is going to look like. I think down here, I don't want it too high. I mean, you could stamp it higher, but I think as far as the size go, I think it looks maybe like it's best down in this area. Now on this one, instead of heavy, even pressure, like the main stamps up there, kind of light, even pressure down here, because we don't want to smear an image, right? Not at this stage of the game. Don't want it all blurred out. Okay, now before I add in some of that pigment ink into the scene, we'll definitely need to allow all that foreground imagery to dry. It's very wet down here with those foreground elements, so we'll let it dry a little bit and come back to it. So probably take a few hours to dry, or before I come back to it. But I would let it sit. I don't know, like I said, the inks are not drying very quickly today, so it might be a little bit of time. I'm guessing I would give it, I don't know, half an hour to an hour to dry. If you have a embossing gun or something like that, you can also hit it like that. It'll dry it off. But I don't know, sometimes I think that changes the overall kind of depth of the ink by doing that. So a lot of times I like to just let it air dry Okay, so we'll do that, and we'll come back to it and see if it needs anything else besides that pigment ink. Sometimes looking at a scene from fresh eyes, you know, after you've kind of let it sit for a little bit of time, gone on to do other things, you come back and say, oh, I need more of this or this, you know, something, you know, little details are kind of missing, so we'll see. Okay, I'm back, and taking a look at this scene after it's had a chance to set and dry a little bit, and I feel it needs a little bit more warmth and kind of a change of hue. Not a change of hue, but just additional hue. I'm thinking in the form of yellow. All right. It just seems like it could use a little bit of a zip. There's not enough variation in here, and I feel that I don't need any more red or orange or green or something like that, but I just need to kind of liven up everything in here with some kind of uniform tone. Now a yellow is going to be the foundation for the oranges and the greens, you know, as far as a universal hue. So I'm just going to go in here with some of my alcohol-based, this one's called Dandelion, and just add a zip of some color to this. Okay. And we'll see what it does. I felt the green and the orange areas were okay, but it just needed it needed unity to it. And when I say unity, I'm referring to kind of a foundational common hue, just to kind of first of all, it's going to hopefully it's going to liven things up a little bit, and just I don't know, just bring that unity to the tree line. Even if they do kind of represent maybe some different types of trees within that area, or just trees that are turning colors at a different rate from one another. Okay. And by coloring it yellow, it's not going to look as though where I put it over the green, it's not going to look yellow because the green is going to be showing through. So it'll only show yellow where I've retained a little bit of the white of the paper. Okay, now let's look at some of the reflections down here. Okay, I need to bring some of this yellow in here a little bit. Kind of mirroring what's above somewhat. Okay, that looks a little bit better to me. It just looks a little bit more full, I would say. Now, I have some additional colors here. I wish I had a little bit more of a slightly more dull yellow. Okay, that was the dandelion. Okay, this one's just yellow. Let's see what that one looks like. It's a little bit more pure yellow. Maybe the other one had a little bit of a deeper value to it, darker value. Now, there's an intensity to this tree line here in terms of the color intensity. saturation. Some of these rocks in the scene, now they're looking a little bit anemic in relation to that intensity. So what I'm going to do is I'll just bring in some gray tones. Maybe I'm just looking at some pens here. This one's a cool gray, and I don't know. Let me just pull out some pens here. Here's a. Let me see. Here's a cool gray 5 and cool gray 3. What other colors could be used? I don't know. Here's a bit of a violet, maybe. Periwinkle. Maybe that would be better than the violet. Something like that. These tones right here. And I think that would look good with the rocks. Alright, now let's see here. Let me start off with the cool gray 3, and let me just add that to some of the shadow areas. I'm just kind of following the design itself. The design itself has some shadows in it, and I'm just going in and reiterating that. Maybe even add some down here in the reflection. Down here on the kayaker, maybe I can add a little bit of a shadow to that. Actually, a blue down there would be better. Let's do that. Let's start off with an aquamarine. It's very light, but we'll start off with that. Doesn't really do anything. I need to go a little bit darker. So I'm just looking at my box of pens. This one's an azure blue. Okay, getting there. So typically, if you see this water almost like fabric, I'm making the shadows just a deeper version of the color that it's representing. Okay, that was a little bit darker blue. Let's go and blend this out a little bit. You can kind of move the inks around a little bit before they completely set up when it's on glossy paper, like that. So there's a little bit of a shadow to that kayaker down there. Let's go back up to those rocks. Okay, I've added some of the that first gray in these areas. Now what I'm going to do, because this is a darker gray, I'll add that kind of more towards the base of it. Maybe give it a little bit of a shadow. I'll go down in that kind of sandy bank area as well. Kind of like so. Oh, just going in and coloring, having some fun going in and coloring in between some of these trees down at the base. Yeah, so I kind of like that gray. Let's add a little bit more of that gray to the kayak as well. Deepen the shadow there. It looks like it, to me it looks like it's sitting in the water a little bit more. Okay, now, I think I've mentioned this in other videos, but I was reading this photography book, and it was talking about putting people in, placing people in scenes to give kind of a visual anchor point to the photograph, and it gives perspective. If you put a person in there in a certain area within a photograph, then you kind of by relation know how large certain things are. And I guess the joke used to be to some old-time landscape photographers that you put someone in the scene with a red jacket or something like that, so they really kind of pop. And I'm going to do the same here. I'll put this little kayaker with maybe a red life vest. And why don't we put them, we'll put a little bit of a red reflection in the water here. It's a little bit too much, so let's go back to that kind of blending idea. Let's take a lighter pen now. Let's go back to that cool gray number 3 and just kind of blend that red out a little bit, just so it's not so, I don't know, strong of a hue in the water. Okay, so do something like that. Okay, see a little reflection down here, so we're reiterating this idea of a reflective quality that's going on in the background, right here in the foreground. Okay, so you kind of reiterate your concepts here and there. This is kind of a nice gray. Let me see if I can throw in some streaks here and there with that. Oh, see, I'm coming in from the outsides like that, just like I did with the stylus tool, and in the sky too. I kind of streaked it from the outside in like that. And this cool gray is very light, so even if it's a horrible streak, I'm not worried about it too much. Okay. Well, let's see here. I've added in all that yellow in here. I'm checking to see what I'm kind of missing now. I'm somewhat happy with what's going on in the scene, but I'm missing some of those little details that were added. This isn't always just a linear process. Okay, you stamp out the scene, you color it, then you add your effects, you know, like highlights or something like that. You can add the highlights, and if you decide you want some more ink, you tone it back over that, add more highlights or whatever little effects you want to do. I can't remove, you know, certain things like, you know, all those trees that are in there or something like that, but I can tone over them. You know, I can't do, I don't know, I can't do something like a subtractive process easily. You know, I'm not going to remove something. I guess maybe there's some kind of bleach, you know, effect or something like that you can do with certain things, but for the most part you can go back in and add something that you've already done in a previous step. Like I've added some of this turquoise paint pen effect in here for little highlights, and I toned over it, but just, you know, if I want that to be brought back into the scene, and just do it right over the you know, the additional layer, in this case of yellow that was put down. Okay, that's a fairly light color. I mean, dark as far as a highlight goes. All right, so let's go in with the peach paint pen. If you have some gel pens that are kind of more pastel in hue, you can use those. See if I can zoom in a little bit here. Okay. Things are looking a little bit kind of on the intense side in here, and this is where I always go in and add this pigment ink into the scene, in this dye-based technique at least. Cotton swab, you really want to remove a lot of the ink. You don't want to be applying to like a glob of ink. But like back in here, I probably won't. I don't think this scene needs a lot of it. It's not. It doesn't look like an early morning. Well, not too early of a morning. Maybe it looks more like it's approaching kind of pre-sunset or something like that, like a 4 p.m. type of thing or something. But so I won't add too much of this. But just to create a little bit of variation, we'll oscillate the shoreline a little bit between kind of fog or mist maybe and no mist. If you ever look at a movie set, and if there's ever a forest in it, quite often in the background they'll have this kind of rolling mist going through it. Just to kind of add a little bit of a lighting variation and movement in the background. It makes things more lush. You know, when you're looking through that kind of diffused lighting moving through a scene. Okay, let's see here. Can you see it down here? It's making the shoreline in those areas a little bit more obscure, I guess, in terms of the imagery. Alright, let me try to keep this in. I'm gonna try to do this and keep this in the camera frame here. Okay, and maybe some of these trees in the distance kind of poking up, you know, in the background. Maybe I'll put some of this pigment ink, very thin application of pigment ink over those distant trees, and it makes them look even more distant when you do that. So see, it kind of pushed those back, right? So we have this imagery right here, and I feel that adding that little texture or layer of pigment ink in those areas over that imagery kind of makes it a little bit more translucent. You can see what's coming through it a little bit. And I feel it kind of sets it into this idea of water here more by doing that, because some of this texture is in the water, so it kind of goes into the scene right here, okay? So we have water, land, sky, okay? Having a little bit of that translucent pigment ink over that area, that translucency, going from land to sky, I feel that incorporates that area in with this area a little bit more. So there's this, instead of this having this kind of hard edge, in other words, you know, where you have land or you have the stamped imagery and then you have this area in the background that represents sky. If you have this kind of this thing that's moving in between both of them, in this case it's pigment ink, I feel it kind of blends in there a little bit more. Okay, we still have a separation that still represents, you know, this land and sky, but it makes it a little bit more, I don't know, graceful as far as that separation goes. You know, the transition, I guess that's what I'm looking for. The transition between these areas is a little bit more graceful because you have this, you're introducing something in common between those areas. And why don't I do that? These little points down here that represent kind of the background trees up there reflecting down here. So why don't I go in and I'll add some of that pigment ink over the tops of those ones as well, so we kind of reiterate once again something that's going on in the sky or above in the reflected area below. And I hope all that makes sense. Okay, I'm just adding a little bit more underneath these trees just to kind of give a little bit of variation. When I touch it with my finger, I'm kind of removing some of that. I always tell people I think I remove as much as I add in, or if not more. You know, I'll lay that pigment ink down and I'll just tap it off because sometimes it's just too much. Okay, so that's, I don't know, it's looking better to me than before. You know, these are some pretty bright colors within those trees, so I like doing things where we retain, you know, a lot of that brightness and what's going on in these areas, but in some areas we kind of have to push it back a little bit with some, I don't know, texture. Okay, down here, this canoe right here, kayak, why don't I just add a little bit of this mist down in that area as well, so it gives it something in common with the mid-ground, background areas. Okay. So what that looks like is that. So we have that little obscure area around the kayak. Okay. It's softer, right? I feel it sits in the scene just fine. I mean, we have a shadow down there, but I've kind of made that highlight. I'll get back in the background. I don't think I inked up that um, cotton swab more than once, so I was just, and I dabbed off a lot of it too before I took it to the scene. So this is just with one inking up of that, and it's very light ink as well. So kind of, with repetitive tapping, you can kind of, you know, keep using that same application. So that'll kind of give you an idea of just how dry this cotton swab really is. Okay, I've added, I thought I needed some down here, or could use some. If you can learn this technique right here, and the whole secret to this is how, the relative dryness and softness of this cotton swab you're using, okay? You want it really, really dry and somewhat smashed so that it's a soft applicator. You don't want it all real tightly bound. So this is a, cotton swab, but there's some of those that are really tightly wound acrylic ones, okay? You want one that's going to kind of fray like that. And a lot of people have, your pigment ink pads are pretty new because we don't use those as often. We'll emboss with it or something like that once in a while, but so really be careful about how much you add to that and really blot it off a lot. And then when you add that in there, I feel that that softness really adds to it. And for me, in a lot of scenes that I've done, in this technique right here, the glossy paper dye-based technique, it really adds and even can save some scenes that might not have turned out the way you thought they would going into it, in terms of color schemes or something like that. I don't know. For me, it can really, really, I don't know. It's an additive kind of little effect at the end, but I feel it's an integral part of the I don't know, of the look that I'm going for. Alright, there's all these branches in the foreground here. I like them as is, but I think I'll add a few little highlights on a couple of them. I want it subtle though, because I don't want these to really stand out too much. So I'm just doing a really light tap with this gel pen. And it's a white Uniball gel pen. And if I just barely touch it, I can get a really small dot out of it, okay? And this is just a very subtle highlight, just to kind of make them seem a little bit more dimensional. Although I was fine with them just being kind of more flat and as a silhouette, but I don't know, I want to bring in some little element to that foreground. I felt that would give it something in relation to the background. Let's see if those will show up here. Okay, yeah, you see those just little dots here and there. This is a fairly thick pen tip right here, but I just touched it barely. Okay, you see how that kind of makes these branches in here and trees tops a little bit more dimensional because they're capturing some of the light. So there's a little bit, slight bit of push-pull in here in terms of something, bringing depth into what would have been a very flat-looking area within here. So what that looks like here, bring it more at arm's distance, you can still see a little bit of those highlights down there. When you look at the scene overall, I feel that we have a fairly good dimensional space right here. Alright, so I think that looks, I don't know, it looks done to me. the only thing I could think of is, I don't know, maybe a few highlights in the background with the white pen again, because I think I added some before. Before I went over it with the yellow. I don't know, just for a little, slightly bit more contrast in a couple areas here. Okay. Alright, that should do it there. I don't know about you, but if I was a kayaker, or if I lived in an area like that, I would definitely go out on the water at times. I've taught in places like around Seattle and kind of upstate New York in that Rome area, and some of the students in the class taking the Stampscapes class would tell me that they go out on the lake after work or whatnot. And I always thought that is so cool to be able to do that. Can you imagine going out for a paddle or something like that? It just seems like it'd be tremendously relaxing and fun to do. So anyway, that was a fun scene, and I don't think I've stamped those autumn banks in a little while, so that was really fun going in there and coloring it. That I don't know, those different hues throughout there, and just kind of reminding myself kind of the possibilities within kind of that open area like that, in terms of what color schemes you can do. In the past, sometimes I've done them all green, kind of more spring type of thing, and sometimes I've colored them all the same reddish oranges or something like that, but it's kind of fun to oscillate it a little bit, back and forth, where the trees are in different stages, like you would see out in nature more. Alright, so anyways, hope you enjoyed the scene, and thanks for watching.